Welcome to the very first episode of the Dutchy and Swoop podcast show. I'm here with Brodie Holland. And I remember talking to you. We've been talking for a while about trying to get something done and seeing out training and stuff like that. And I remember last week when we sort of talked about after training, I said to you, it's so weird because I remember being at the MCG when it was getting rebuilt. I was there with my auntie. It was a Hawthorn game, and I was watching you play right in front of me because I was right on the boundary. And I was probably just a little bit smaller than I am now, but but 15 years younger. And and it's just surreal to be here in the studio with you and doing this venture together.
Mate, it's awesome to be linking arms with your good self as well. I've been seeing some of the good stuff that you've been doing on YouTube and social media in general, and obviously the Collingwood content is something that us Collingwood, and I am a Collingwood nuffy, even though I used to play for Collingwood, I'm still a Collingwood nuffy. We want to see more info about what's going on inside, outside, at training and in games, and anything to do with reviewing Collingwood. We want to see more of it, and I thought I'd jump on the bandwagon and leverage out of my good man, Swoop Luke here. And I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is.
I know there's a real thirst for Collingwood content out there at the moment, especially given they're going so well. Albeit, unfortunately, we lost last week, but obviously we're having a great season to date.
Yeah, and look, so we still really don't know. We're still tuning out the finer details of what this is going to be, but it will be all pies always, which is really nice. It'll be analytical sort of views and just talks about the game that we just played, the game that's sort of coming up, which makes it pretty easy because we've got a game coming up against Fremantle really soon, which we'll talk about towards the end. But I'll throw to you, Brodie.
Yeah.
How you been, mate?
Good, mate. If I can add something, I did start a podcast, number one footy podcast, earlier this year, and it was great fun. One thing was very time consuming because we were covering everything in footy, and it got a little bit busy with obviously coaching and family and this, that, and the other. Smack bang doing a podcast purely about Collingwood, which I'm all over. It's easier. It's more fun for me. Plus midweek, it suits nicely. So we've moved on from that and putting all our energy into this, which is really exciting.
And so it's going to be really good. It's going to be really fun. We'll start off straight up with the Cats game that just happened.
What a game too, by the way.
Incredible.
Unbelievable, wasn't it? Really,
one of the best home and away games that I've seen for a while. I know we're Collingwood supporters, so we're always going to say that. But that was absolutely insane. Jack Crisp's 245th consecutive game, which is, could you imagine playing 11 years just straight, no breaks?
I reckon I used to play 10 games and had 5 off, and whether it be suspension or injury or getting dropped, it was a combination of each. So that is an unbelievable effort. And if anyone needs a break this week, it's probably Crispy, but he actually really doesn't. I mean, he's just so durable. You've got to take your hat off to him. He's obviously prepares so well. He's the ultimate professional, and we love the way he goes about it.
No, definitely, and that's what I was saying. I was like, you'd think after he breaks it, they'd say, all right, take a couple of weeks off, just chill out, hang out with the family. But he's just going to keep going, and we'll never ever see this happen again. There's no way.
You wouldn't think so. Well, we say that about a lot of records, but it's going to be very hard to break, you would have thought. And even now, you look at the play management type stuff with obviously Collingwood resting a few blokes this week. That type of stuff is going to continue to happen. And there's a lot of games to be played, more games than there used to be 20 years ago. 5-day breaks, 4-day breaks. 3 games in 16 days, and that type of stuff is happening in this day and age. So it would be very unlikely. So well done, Jack Crisp. You're a superstar, mate.
Absolutely huge. And look, it could have been the fairy tale finish. It would have been maybe a stolen game if we had won it right in the end. But the fight that the Pies showed. 3 goals in 3.5 minutes. Brody Marchik playing through an abdominal strain as well. I've never had an abdominal strain.
Tough cookie. They're pretty tough, those Tassie boys, they tell me.
So what did you think of the game as a whole?
Look, it was an unbelievable game. Obviously very exciting. Look, I'll go back to the start of the game. We're looking at, obviously there's a lot of talk around umpiring and
and we'll talk about that.
The negative side of some of the free kicks, and we saw the Bobby Hill free kick, etc. But I just go back to the start of the game, and I remember, I think it was the first ball up, side bottom grabs Atkin, holding the ball, didn't get paid, goes forward, kicked the first goal. Within 45 seconds of the game. It was a real clear holding the ball. I just can't get my head around why 4 umpires can't sort this out. Even the 5th one, talking to the guy in the ear. You've heard about that
I've heard about that.
So, but getting back to the game, the umpiring obviously wasn't great. Geelong had +7 in free kicks. You look at all the stats. Collingwood were 1 disposals, 1 clearance, 1 hit outs, +19. They pretty much won every. I think centre bounces
all the major
+6 as well. And they're very dynamic. I think they kicked a couple of goals from centre bounces, and they look dynamic in those areas. To me, they look like they were in control for the game for the most part. They lost the first 10 minutes. They got in front, and then I think from around about the 20-minute mark of the first quarter, right through about 20-minute mark of the second, they kicked 5 goals in a row, and they looked like they were just going to take control of the game. Look, to Cats' credit, they're a good side, and they came back and kicked a couple of goals against the grain and got themselves going again. And out of nowhere, they were in front and by a couple of goals, and we were looking down the barrel. But what an exciting game. Obviously a little bit of entertainment from our mate Baz over there at Cats. He just continues to entertain the fans alike, and it was one interesting one. I think in the first quarter, I think he kicked their 2nd or 3rd goal in the first quarter. I don't know if you remember, and I wouldn't do this if I was ever playing to Nathan Buckley. But did you see the goal he kicked from 55 on the run?
He burnt Danger, right?
He burnt Danger. Like Danger was like 30 metres out, all on his own with the arms out. And he's just gone bang from 55 on the run. I don't know if I'd actually be patting him on the head if he burnt me like that.
So what would have happened if Buckley, if you were going out 55?
He wouldn't have been happy. You just wouldn't do it. Actually, I'd be too scared to do it, I reckon.
So with the Cats, they had that incredible sort of last quarter. Pies were up by 20 odd points in somewhere in the 3rd quarter, and I remember watching that, and I felt like the game just had, and I don't know if you felt it, somewhat of a negative aura around it. Like I just felt like I was never comfortable. Even 20 points up, I thought something's not clicking. And in the first quarter we hit the post a couple of times, and then in that 3rd quarter we have all the ball, like you said, all the clearances, all this sort of work, and we just don't make it count. And that's been our undoing for the last few years.
Do you think there's an element of being overconfident at times? Because you look at the start of the game, I think when you're winning and winning well and everyone's confident around a footy club, and it's something you don't notice, it's not very noticeable, but they started the game probably 10% off in terms of intensity and commitment and hard edge, and defensively they just weren't quite there. And then all of a sudden they got 3 goals, and they're thinking, shit, we better switch on. We thought this, I mean, it's a strange one to say because you're not going to not get yourself up for 90,000 at the MCG, but you kind of, it's not do or die for the Cats. They had something to chase. The league ladder top position was Collingwood's at that particular time, so they were chasing obviously the top team, and it was extra motivation for them. So they started really, really well. And sometimes even when you from same philosophy, you get in front. And here we go again, we're rolling. And then you just take the foot off the pedal for 5 or 10%, or you just don't defend quite as well. Oh, he'll cover me, my man, she'll be right.
Yes, yep.
And then all of a sudden you leak a couple of goals against the grain and they're back into the game.
Yep.
So I reckon we've got to still, as a team, got to get better at getting more ruthless and putting the game out of reach.
100%.
And that's not just continuing to attack, but that is to kill the game late in quarters. To you get 5 goals in front. Let's just defend and play a little bit slower and play the line a little bit more, get the ball out of bounds, reset, catch a breath, and play a little bit more dour at the right times. And generally speaking, we do it pretty well when we want to kill games late in the game.
Yes, yeah, we do.
But you can actually kill the game in 2nd and 3rd quarters, or kill the quarter and reset. And so they can't, kick a couple of goals late in the quarter, because nothing worse when you've owned a quarter, you kick 4 to their 1, and then
they get those red time goals.
Yeah, red time goals, they kick a couple and they're back into it all over again. So I think there's still that element where we can get better too.
And it's funny you should say, you use that example of, someone else is going to sort of do it. I noticed that a lot in that game as well, where we'd be flying for a mark, and especially, one of our problems this year has been kicking it into the forward 50 and none of us competing for it, and it's been their defenders mopping it up, and we did that probably about half a dozen times where we'd go inside 50 and a Geelong defender was just free, straight to him, chest mark, was sort of good to go. I did feel like it was very much, oh, he's gonna cover me, he's gonna do it, so I'm gonna stand back, and then the other guy's thinking he's gonna do it, so I'll stand back. No one jumps up.
One thing I noticed they do on slow play is they do kick that sort of territory kick in, and it's usually to a Mason Cox or a McStay when he's down there. And that's one play that they use, and they try and seal off or block for that player to get good position in the air. And sometimes when you don't nominate the player quick enough and get the player in that position, it's easy for the opposition to pick, especially when they've got extra numbers behind the footy. Geelong are a very good intercept marking team. They're very good at flooding numbers back, and obviously they're great at scoring from turnover. So sometimes you do have to just chip the ball around and not go in too quick, especially if they're outnumbering you in our forward 50. So, although in saying that, and I do know exactly what you're talking about, they did take 18 marks inside 50, which is quite high. For the game. So, although they are muffing a few entries up, they are, when they get it right, they are very efficient as well. So there's probably two ways you can look at it at the moment. And high in contested marks. I can't remember the contested marks stats were, but I think we doubled catch.
I think like you said, we on paper, you look at this game. If you didn't see the scores, you go, "Oh, Pies won by 5 goals." It was just one of those really weird games. But I think sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes you need a loss like that where, even though we were winning big, you could still be papering over a few sort of cracks in your game. Yeah. So now we're sort of exposed that. They'll go back to work. They'll take on Fremantle. But before we sort of move into that game, it'll be remiss of us as Collingwood supporters not to talk about the umpiring decisions.
Yeah, obviously the Bobby Hill one's been getting a bit of traction at the moment. And I know, a couple of the ex-umpires have come out and said it was technically a trip because he dropped him slightly underneath the knees, and it slid down to that, and then there's the argument, was it holding the ball first before he slid down? But they apparently take the tackle in its entirety. So not just the first part of the tackle, and that's how they umpire. Look, I'm a little bit, you got to fill the room, don't you? You got to read the room. Everyone in the stand and everyone at home thought it was holding the ball. And if it's marginal, if you're 2 inches below the knees, that part of the game, it was just, it's the theatrics of the game. Yeah. Everyone wanted it to be holding the ball. Everyone wanted a game. It looked like holding the ball to the naked eye. Just freaking pay holding the ball.
And, even the commentators on the broadcast was holding the ball. And then you see the exact same thing happen. I don't know if you saw it the next day. Hawthorn, Richmond, Sicily did the exact same thing.
That's right.
Got him at the hips, slid down, got him below the knee, and it was holding the ball.
Yeah.
But for Bobby to run from inside the 50 to catch up was just incredible sort of anyway. And then the other big one was the touch, no touch on the goal line by Blicavs. He swears black and blue that he touched it. I would, even if I didn't touch it, I would say that I touched it as well on the goal line.
Yeah, so with these type of calls, I don't know, is there a different way that we can do this and say we don't know we're not sure what the call is, the goal umpire? Can we go straight to the umpire upstairs for a look? Because the problem is that goal umpire may not have a clue what's happened, or he might 60%. I think he's touched it, 40% he hasn't. But I'm not clear in any way.
Yeah, but he has to make a decision.
But he has to make a decision. Yeah. So how do you make a decision when you're not sure? That's the whole point of going upstairs. So is there a way we can say, okay, well, no one knows down here. It's up to you upstairs. And if then it's not definitive, then it's just, we can't pay it. We've got to pay it a goal. We don't pay it a goal, depending on the circumstances around that particular thing, and pay it accordingly, and put all the faith in the guy up the top to make the right decision there, because the problem is some of these decisions are actually wrong, but because it's not clear on the camera, they've got to roll with what obviously the goal umpire is saying, and you know, there's probably half a dozen every year that are completely wrong.
100%, and I think there's a couple things sort of in that. The first one is, you know, we got to stop using 7-Eleven cameras for a multi-billion-dollar sort of game with all the revenue and everything, memberships and stuff going into the game. You know, we can stop using those sort of cameras.
We can use our cameras here.
Yeah, these
ones are pretty good ones.
Beautiful cameras from Backchat Studios. And the second thing is, in the Premier League, I don't know if you watch any of the soccer and stuff, but in the Premier League, when they've got the VAR decision, it'll go upstairs. They'll have a talk about it. They'll call the umpire to the video, and they'll say, "Look, this is what we think. Have another look at it in slow mo and whatever you think, and then you can make the call." And there could be an element. I know it'll slow down the game, but imagine that's in a grand final.
Yeah, I know.
And it'll just
you got to think worst case scenarios and build your case and your philosophies and your process around that.
Yep.
Because, I mean, imagine someone, you know, a team's got medals around their necks and holding a trophy up, and it's decided by a situation just like that. That would be horrendous.
It would. Yeah. And look, before we move on from the Geelong game, we wanted to talk about Crisp's.
Actually, can I just butt in for a
sec? Go ahead.
Because there is also talk around the umpires with the fifth umpire.
Or
the coach's umpire upstairs having a chat to the players, and I think they're still trying to. I mean, the AFL and the umpires fraternity are telling us that they're only really talking to them in the breaks about decisions and coaching. They're only just giving them positive feedback about positioning and just general things during the quarters. But apparently, there's 3 or 4 coaches didn't even know that this was happening.
Interesting.
So I'm not sure why they wouldn't have got that, obviously information at hand. But it's really interesting. The integrity of the game. Potentially, I'm not saying there's anything bad going on or anything negative going on from that point of view, but you can see how match fixing could happen pretty bloody easily
with those umpires up there.
You know, depending on who that person is in control of obviously coaching the umpires on any given weekend or game. So
we've seen it the last couple of times, right, where the umpire is sort of like, they've said that it's
Well, they're saying in those cases it's
the other umpires.
They're saying, I saw a great call, you know, blah blah.
Yeah.
But, you know, if he's got obviously the control to say something, you know, what's for him to say once or twice a game when the game's in the balance, say, hey, mate, you better pay a free kick there because I've got $50 for under 39 points. You never know. You never know.
God damn. You never know. But never know.
We are looking for betting sponsors too, by the way.
Talking about umpiring and all that sort of stuff, getting into Crisp's face right after the goals kick. So, you know, these players, especially Crisp, has played 11 consecutive years.
Yes.
He knows what to do after the siren. He knows he can't get off his mark. And Gerard Whateley brought it up with Razor Ray.
I was just watching that this
yesterday.
morning.
Yeah. And, you know, the umpire after that Crisp goal was right in his line saying, you know, go whatever he was saying to him. Well, this guy's having the most important kick of his career.
Yes.
I think it was a bit. I think the umpire was doing a bit of look at me.
Yeah, possibly.
What would happen if this was an umpire up into you?
Yeah, look, he was right up in his grill, wasn't it? It was a bit strange. Like, I think if you're having a set, I've never been in that position before. After the siren, to be honest, probably would have kicked it though. No, but. Yeah, look, it is a strange one because you do want to free the mind. You want to take a deep breath and try and relax as much as you can. The last thing you want is an umpire coming in your face. Hey, mate, you can't go over the mark. The mark's there. You know, you can't go around. You know, you got to run in a straight line. The siren's gone. You know, mate, he's played 245 games in a row. He knows frigging exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Like, just get out of the way. And there was one similar, I think, with Houston. They went back to a couple of weeks ago against Port. It might have been where he kicked one outside 50. The umpire goes around the mark, goes to the side of the mark, probably yells a couple of things out from a distance.
And then that's it. Stays away.
And then he was to the lateral to the man on the mark, whereas this guy actually stood behind him and watched him kick from behind.
I haven't seen it before. I haven't seen an umpire do that
So,
before.
yeah, I'm not sure what protocol is for umpires in that situation. Well, it's nearly like you said, here I am, guys. This is my time to shine.
Yeah.
And then because the camera watches when he runs in from
right
behind,
there.
it's like he's right behind him. It's like, So you certainly got a bit of PR this week. If that was what you wanted, you got it, boy. Yeah.
But look, it was just not meant to be. But we move on pretty quickly, literally pretty quickly, to the Fremantle game.
Yes.
5-day break, and we wanted to talk about player management.
Yes.
So I've got some numbers here about. So we know that 4 guys aren't playing, so they've been touted not to play for the last.
So who we got? We got Pendles, obviously. Degoe,
Maynard,
and
Checkers.
Checkers with the abdominal strain.
So that's 4 big names, nearly 1,000 games experience not playing.
Wow.
And last week against the Cats, there were some minutes managed. Like a good one, for example, here is Bo McCreary, on average for the last few rounds, was averaging 76% time on ground. He played 67%. He only had, I think, about 6 or 9 touches or something like that. Nick Dacos went up 5% in his time on ground. Ned Long went down 11%, and Ned Long is that guy who is getting hard into that
So they
ball.
come out and given this information that they were trying to manage minutes, or you?
Craig McRae came out after the game and said, "Look, if you go a bit deeper, we were managing minutes." So they were looking at this 5-day sort of turnaround, and Lipinski had more time on ground. Frampton usually plays 93%. He played 83%. Sidebottom went down, so they're really managing the minutes. What does that?
So let me be the devil's advocate on this one. Look, do you think it potentially may have cost us the game not giving extra minutes to certain players, potentially? I mean, you could never answer that question.
Yeah, but like when you see like that Ned Long number down 11%, that's the guy that you want when the going gets tough. I don't know. You'd have to go back and watch when he's off and when he's on, but that's the guy that you want more time on ground because he's the one that's bashing and crashing packs. And
so my thoughts are on this one, throw all your eggs into the basket of beating Geelong. Throw it all in, whatever you need. If you need McCreary out there for more pressure for longer, if you need Ned in the middle for more hardness for longer, if whatever you need, throw it in, have a crack, win the game, and then let's just take a deep breath and see how we manage the Fremantle situation. There. And I know the other thing is, obviously McRae's an absolute gun coach, and you take nothing away from him, and it's easy for me to sit here and make comment. But they made a decision on those guys, they were going to miss this particular game on Thursday night against Fremantle. I think it was Maynard, Pendlebury,
Degoe
and Degoe. And Degoe. Forget about Checkers because he's got the injury. Those 3 guys were always going to rest, or at least 2 of those 3 were always going to rest. That was penciled in at the start of the year.
Correct.
But can you change things on the run depending on circumstances as well? You don't have to follow through with what you decided on. You could we need to win against Fremantle now. Let's put 2 of those 3 or 4 in. Try and get the win and rest them the week after. I know they've obviously thought all these things out, but my thoughts are Geelong's a big game in the MCG. They're going to be right up in the top. It's an 8-point game, basically, that one. You got to win it. Throw all your eggs into that basket and worry about Fremantle later and manage plays for that one.
No, definitely. And I think the weird one about that, if they were going to manage players, was Jeremy Howe in that Geelong game. So they managed Jeremy Howe, and he'll come back for the Fremantle game. But out of everyone, that's probably the guy that you want against a Geelong side that has, Cameron and Dangerfield, and that they're going to, go in long. He's the best, one of the best inset markers in the team.
It is, and you'd like to think you'd play him in that game if he was right to go. I think the only thing is because he's had that history of injuries, he's one player that's probably needs to be managed more than most. And 3 games in however many days is probably going to put him at risk.
True. Yep.
But like I said before, if he's 98% fit, I'm playing Jeremy Howe.
Definitely,
because he makes us 1 point or minus 1 point better than and potentially put us in a position to win 100%. That game.
Yeah. And so he'll come back for the Fremantle game. So it's a 5-day break. Those big 4 going out. So there's a bit of a debate if Charlie West debuts in the West. They'll take him over as a big sort of key forward. So we're looking at Ed Allen, Lockie Sullivan, Jeremy Howe, Oleg Markov to come in. What do you make of this game sort of going in? So Fremantle got absolutely smashed in every sort of aspect by the Saints.
It's a funny game, this game called footy, because it is played upstairs and Fremantle were pretty ordinary on the weekend. Look, they did have a couple of inexperienced players out there. I watched a little bit of that game and they look really poor with, obviously efficiency at times. They look like their physicality to hold tackles and just general efficiency was just right off. They look raw. They look lacking energy. It's just funny though. You take a couple of players out and you play a couple of kids and it can change everything. But they've never been a team that's played well away from home. And I know they've slowly started to get that right, but they still haven't quite ticked off that box properly, I don't think. But you go back home, they're 5 goals better at home. They've got the crowd behind them. The Western Australian would have been into them all week going, these guys, they're done. What's going on? Longmuir's job is at risk, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden you just go into desperation mode, which takes your intensity through the roof. And you can only imagine, they'd be thinking, geez, what great opportunity it is to get back on track and beat, one of the best sides in the competition. So all of a sudden it changes. Collingwood got a few out, so we're 4 goals, probably down. In terms of the quality we've got out there. They're 5 goals better at home. The game closes up, and I think it'll be a really good game.
And look, as a former player, and you just touched on this. I know the media was a little bit now it's like 24/7. There's 1,000 footy shows, 1,000 footy podcasts, and social media and stuff. And I know you didn't have that when you were playing, but when the papers were sort of getting into the Pies or getting into you, did you listen to that outside noise or just listen to sort of Mick?
You kind of couldn't help it because you just knew that you'd open the Herald Sun up or you'd watch the footy show and you just watch those two things or read that in any given week. And it was everyone was doing the same. Like now, there's just information everywhere. So we are regurgitating the same information a lot of the time on all those different platforms, but. There is different sources of information you can go to, so a lot of variety. But I wouldn't say I got caught up in it. I would read it, acknowledge it, and go on. I know who was it? Mike Sheen had a bit of a crack at me a couple of times about a couple of things. But when you're playing footy, you're playing AFL, and you're a young fellow. Someone says something bad. I didn't really care, to be honest. I had pretty thick skin, pretty young. I'm not sure why. I just didn't really care. As long as my coach was happy with the way I was going, my captain was happy with me, my teammates had trust in me, I couldn't care less what anyone else thought. And I just kept sailing because, obviously I had some bad publicity at various stages with reports and things like that. But, I haven't killed anyone. I'm not in jail.
Exactly.
And that's how you got to look at it a little bit. Life's so much bigger than footy as much as we're obsessed with it. There's a lot more out there. And you realise that once you finish playing, family's so important, and your next phase in your career is so important too. Hence why I'm here at the
moment. And look, speaking of you touched on what Fremantle was sort of going to do, and we saw footage of them, mouth guards in at training and sort of going hard. They lost contested possessions by like close to 50. They got smashed in clearances. What do you expect them? Do you expect them to come out hard and then sort of kind of like a Geelong, come out hard and falter a little bit for us to sort of catch up on?
It's interesting you say that. That was in my head what I'm thinking because they were massively down on contested possession. They did look a bit soft on the weekend, and it was I know they haven't been great. They've been up and down this year, but it was still very un-Fremantle-like in a lot of ways. I expect them to be probably a bit over the top with their physicality and behind the ball stuff, the bumper barring, the sledging, the just general hardness around the packs. But because they're young around the fringes and inexperienced in some areas on the ground, maybe they will blow themselves up a little bit. We do have a couple of young blokes coming in, potentially West, but obviously Allen's a guarantee to play. So, if they can get on top and intimidate a couple of those guys, who knows what might happen. But at the end of the day, you still got Crisp out there. You still got the Dacos brothers. There's quality everywhere. Bobby Hill, is running muck in the forward line, and we're down a couple of tall targets up forward, but we've still got enough height there to get it done. There is this experience still on every line, regardless of the situation. But the big I suppose gap is Pendlebury really, because he's hardly missed a beat for so long. Is from a leadership and direction and etc. on field. How does that look, especially being away from home? And if you get challenged early with the physicality of Fremantle when they get intimidating and try and throw the world at us, and it upsets the way we look and the way we try and play footy, who's going to keep us in shape on the night? So it'll be interesting to see.
Do you think this is a big game? So with Nick, had a good 2.5 quarters. The last quarter, I can't remember the guy. Was it Manna or it was one of their players? Obviously tagged him out. He had 3 disposals in that last quarter. Very un-Nick-like.
It was the Irish bloke, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mullen. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Do you think
he was
this
a bit old school tagger, wasn't he? He's a bit raw, but he's obviously fit and athletic.
And he did a good job in that last quarter.
Like Stevie Baker, I'm not getting a touch, but you aren't either.
Do you think this is the opportunity for Nick to sort of show us what post-Pendles Collingwood looks like?
Yeah, potentially. I think so. I think someone needs to stand up. It'll be interesting, to see, the close-ups on the cameras and what's going on in the game. And if they end up finding a way to win this game, is which leaders within that next tier are stepping up and guiding the club in the right direction. And I think it's a good time for at least to rest Pendles, because at some stage they need to see who those guys are going to be. I think there's enough there to cover anyway. But obviously Moore's doing a fantastic job as well, and Dacos has stepped up.
Yep.
Obviously Josh, we don't talk about Josh
he's been
enough
great
as a leader as well. And Crispy is Crispy, and he's always going to lead regardless. So there is plenty there, but it'll be interesting to see who steps up.
And sort of with this game and what we were able to do, and we like to play that sort of chaotic ball. Geelong did really well to stifle that in the second half, where they started playing, short kicks, and they were controlling the ball.
Yeah.
Do you see Fremantle doing the same sort of thing, and us
Definitely.
trying to play into that, or just go full out like we have been?
Yeah, and they've changed their game a little bit, Fremantle, trying to go a little bit quicker, and I think they might go back to the way they were first introduced to the Longmuir game plan, and that is backwater centre, that kick mark game, uncontested mark, find the gaps and create your run through lane shifts and short kicks. I think that's what they'll do. I think they'll try and bring the game to I know Collingwood are capable of kicking 100 points comfortably against any team. They'll want to try and bring that down to sort of 70 to 70 each, or obviously they'll be looking to score more than us, but to win the game. But they might be looking for a 70, 76 type of score line.
Right.
To just obviously take away our scoring power, maybe play a bit slower at the right times, take the edge off the game, kill the end of quarters, and it's funny though, you can't do that too much in the modern game, because if you do, you get stuck in your back half, and then you're forced long down the line, and then the opposition are really good at getting scores off intercept or turnover. So you've got to be a little bit careful, but I think there'll be an element of that.
And we're one of the best in scoring off intercept, scoring off turnover teams. And if they sort of play into that, that's when we're making absolutely making our moves, aren't we?
Yeah, 100%. And there's ways you can change the angle of where you kick the ball but still defend as well. Like the old school way was you go long down the line, and then teams start to work out. The Darcy Moores of the world, they press in and they actually jump third, fourth, fifth man in from the back of the contest, mark the ball, then they'd lane shift and get some fast ball through the middle of the ground. But you can even just marginally just changing the angle that you kick, instead of going long down the line, just changing the degrees to 20, 25 degrees. So you're still taking territory, but you're just changing the angle slightly. You pretend you're going long down the line and you shift it. And if you can get someone one-on-one, 50 metres, not down the line, but just slightly inboard, then that can be a good play as well. Maybe that's something they'll try. I know Collingwood use that play on occasions.
Yep.
As well, and most teams use it now and then, but you've just got to pick the right targets, because obviously defenders are sitting off looking, do I go line, do I go the check kick, which way do I go? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And the tactical side of it will be really interesting, and obviously Longmuir was coached at Collingwood as well, which makes it really interesting. He knows, the players inside and out, most of them anyway, and he would know, how they play pretty well. So I think he'll be really switched on coaching wise, Longmuir, for this game.
And you just mentioned the tactics, and one thing that we had on our roster to talk about earlier was that Nick Dacos tactic right at the end of that quarter. Yes. So that's been a big thing, and I know we talked about it off air a lot, where he's gone to that sort of centre half forward, really position, taking Mullen right to the back, so it was 3-on-3 in the middle. What do you make of that as a coach?
It's a great move. I don't even think I've seen that happen before.
No, I definitely haven't.
And it's really interesting. Like, I think it was clearly doable because the young fella from Geelong was so conscious of Dacos he dragged out. Like, a smart player would probably... I'm not that stage of the game. You've got to go to Dacos that stage, because we had to win the game. And so it probably works in that scenario, but when the game is in the balance, you have to obviously, you wouldn't be able to stand off anywhere near as much, because then you can make a 3v2 right around the source.
Yes, yep.
As well. And if you've got a strong ruckman in there, I mean, imagine doing that against Max Gawn. He's just going to hit it to the third player,
exactly,
and then they're out.
Yeah.
But I can see that happening in those circumstances next time as well. When the game's there to be won, it's 3 minutes to go, and you're 5 points down, and you have to win the game. Trying to stretch them and make them think and do something different. Why not? Especially if you've been tagged. Maybe if you don't have a player that's been tagged in there, it might not work.
So it could just be like almost like a Hail Mary. You're not going to do it all the time. Just a bit of a Hail Mary, and it worked, and it pretty much worked out. Thereabouts anyway. Yeah,
it did. I mean, this, and like I was thinking that a lot of times. There is times when I see Dacos become the hit two in there, and he's being tagged, and I know he's probably the best player in the competition, but he's not a strong guy. He's only a little fella. When he's getting tagged in there with a strong-bodied midfielder, I would say don't become the go-to. Maybe sit off deep sweeper, get right back, and then just get some momentum through the stoppage. Or just come from different angles and start, not as far back as he was that time, but start right back and get some speed in, and really test them from that point of view. But, look, I mean... You go back to that Geelong game just for a moment too. They were really dynamic around centre bounces in Collingwood. They do get speed through the contest, and I think they kick two, maybe even two goals, at least 2 goals from centre bounces. And so that's one. Obviously, they've done a heap of work on it. They're +6 in centre bounces on the weekend.
And and again, it's going to be a good sort of tactic, because we know Fremantle when they want to, they like to play sort of slow and. Well, they pretty much played boring football against St Kilda, didn't they?
Yeah.
And look, before we wrap up our first ever episode of the Dutchy and Swoop podcast, it's been really good, and we'll it'll be refined a little bit, and based on what you guys are saying, and want to hear us sort of talk about predictions for this game.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll be a close game. I can see the Pies winning. I'm saying with probably a couple of goals, but I reckon it'll be a tough game. It'll be dour. I expect it to be more dour than some of the games being played this year. I'm going for, let's say, Pies by 11 points.
Beautiful.
What about you, mate?
I've got Pies by 20 points, is what I've been saying. And the beauty about Collingwood this season is we've been able to keep teams to a low score, which has been really good. So our defence really holds up. Jeremy Howe coming back is huge, and I know Pendles and look, De Goey has been thereabouts, so probably best that he rests and gets a bit of a training block into him. But I'm really, really excited to see what Ed Allen can do with a full game.
Correct.
And
he's exciting.
He really, really. We talk about him all the time at training.
Yeah, and it could have been him or Ned Long, couldn't it, for that last midfield spot?
Yeah,
and they've gone with maybe someone who's probably a year or two older and probably slightly in front of him in terms of experience.
Yeah,
and it's worked out for the Pies. It's been a good move in the end. But
now we get to see both of them.
We're excited to see what Ed can do. Like I don't think he's stepped a foot wrong in any of the games that he's played so far, and coming off as the sub. I think it was against Brisbane.
Yes,
very late, had some touches late in the game. So, look, he's an exciting proposition.
And, look, fingers crossed Charlie West debuts. I'd love to see him sort of go about it.
He's a star in the making.
Averaging 4 goals in the VFL.
He is a star, and he's like a Jonathan Brown type, isn't he? I'm not sure if he's just maybe quite as physical as Jonathan Brown, but he's probably a bit classier. Or potentially, I shouldn't say. Probably potentially a bit classier. Mate, he's got a great contested mark and he's a great kick for goal.
Beautiful. Mate, thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Look forward to next week already.
Done. Can't wait. Guys, thank you for joining us on the first ever Dutchy and Swoop podcast. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time, buddy.
Done.
Cheers.
Thanks.